Welcome, history enthusiasts. Today, we'll investigate the turbulent Great Sioux War and fight for the Black Hills. This is a narrative of Sioux endurance, fortitude, and indomitability, not simply war. Sit back, relax, and be ready to explore a historical chapter that resonates today. Let's begin. Sacred soil. Understanding the Black Hills' cultural significance. Delve into the heartland of North America, and you'll find an expansive region, one pulsating with immense spiritual significance. The Black Hills. Known as Paha Sapa to the Sioux, it's not just land or resource, but a sacred landscape, the very heart of everything that is. Consider the Sioux creation myth. In it, the Black Hills emerge as the dwelling place of supernatural beings and were brought into existence by the Great Spirit Wekantanka. When viewed through the Sioux lens, every peak, every valley, and every stream in the Black Hills is a testament to these divine roots. Steeped in these rich spiritual narratives, the Black Hills have long served as the ceremonial, cultural, and burial ground for various Sioux tribes. When a Sioux warrior was laid to rest, they believed his spirit would journey through these sacred hills before reaching the spirit world. It's not just land, it's a bridge between the mortal world and the spiritual realm. But the reverence for the Black Hills extends beyond the spiritual. It is also about sustenance and survival. Bison, a lifeline for the Sioux, roamed these lands in their millions. For centuries, these majestic beasts provided food, shelter, clothing, and tools, embedding themselves into the very fabric of Sioux life. This connection was so profound it was etched in law. The 1868 Fort Laramie Treaty explicitly recognized Sioux ownership of the Black Hills. But, as we'll explore later, treaties can be broken, and the sacred can be commodified. Yes, the Black Hills are a slice of picturesque beauty. Understanding the Sioux perspective fully explains why they fought so fiercely for Paha Sapa, their sacred soil. Shifting alliances, the Sioux tribes before the war. Imagine when the Great Plains were home to diverse Native American tribes. Among these, the Sioux Nation stood out. Not a single entity, but a complex, dynamic alliance of different tribes. The Lakota, Dakota, and Nakota, collectively known as the Sioux, were deeply connected to the land, adapting to the shifting seasons and the bison herds movements. This semi-nomadic lifestyle forged their identity, their independence, their resilience. But even within the Sioux Nation, alliances were fluid. Some tribes were friendly, others were not. To survive and thrive in these wild expanses, the Sioux mastered the delicate art of diplomacy, creating a network of intertribal alliances and rivalries. Trade was the lifeblood of these relationships. Sioux lodges received goods from the Gulf of Mexico and the Pacific coast, demonstrating a complicated continental commerce network. The Sioux were connected to the outside world. European merchants and settlers from the late 17th century changed them. It introduced them to new goods like metal pots, blankets, and most significantly, horses and guns. The horse revolutionized Sioux life, enhancing their mobility, hunting efficiency, and military power. The gun, meanwhile, altered the dynamics of intertribal warfare, making conflicts more lethal. These changes impacted Sioux relationships both among themselves and with other tribes. Yet despite the fluctuating alliances and the societal changes brought on by European contact, one thing remained constant: their connection to the Black Hills. But the world was changing, and this sacred land would soon become a coveted prize. What would the Sioux do when confronted with an insatiable lust for gold? That's a tale to unfold in the next part of our journey through history. Glittering greed, the gold rush's impact on Sioux territory. Every story has a catalyst, a moment that forever changes the course of history. For the Sioux in the Black Hills, that moment arrived as a precious, glittering metal, gold. It was the year 1874. Picture Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer was leading an expedition into the heart of Sioux territory. The mission was to map out the Black Hills, ostensibly for a future fort, but there was more than just military interest at play here. Among the expedition members was a geologist, a man named Horatio Ross, and it was Ross who made a discovery that would have dramatic repercussions. He found gold. News of the find spread like wildfire, and prospectors from nationwide were soon flocking to the Black Hills. Now, remember the Fort Laramie Treaty we talked about earlier? It was still in effect and clearly stated that the Black Hills belonged to the Sioux. Yet the U.S. government looked the other way as prospectors poured into the area. The glittering lure of gold proved too strong. The impact of the gold rush was catastrophic for the Sioux. The influx of miners disrupted the bison herds, polluting the rivers and streams with mining debris. The delicate balance between the Sioux and their environment was upended. With their sacred lands invaded and their way of life threatened, the Sioux were pushed to the brink. The Black Hills, the heart of everything, was under assault. For the Sioux, the choice was clear: capitulate or fight. And fight they did. The Sioux and their Cheyenne and Arapaho allies launched a resistance that would spiral into the Great Sioux War. a conflict ignited by glittering greed that would test the resilience of the Sioux people. Broken promises, the Treaty of Fort Laramie's failure. Once upon a time, there was a promise carved in ink and sealed the handshake. The year was 1868. This promise was the Treaty of Fort Laramie. The treaty was a landmark, recognizing Sioux sovereignty over the Black Hills. It declared unequivocally that the land was theirs, free from encroachment. But as we've learned, gold has a way of making promises vanish into thin air. So what happened to the treaty? Well, it began to unravel almost as soon as gold was discovered. Gold-hungry prospectors swarmed the Black Hills, trampling over the treaty's words with every step. The U.S. government, perhaps blinded by the glimmering prospect of wealth, offered a blind eye instead of enforcement. Not stopping there, the government attempted to buy the Black Hills from the Sioux. They offered $6 million. For the Sioux, the Black Hills were priceless. The offer was rejected. The government did not respond diplomatically. They demanded the Sioux surrender to the Black Hills or suffer repercussions. After the Sioux refused, the administration designated them hostile, allowing military intervention. In a blink, the promise of Fort Laramie faded. The treaty had failed, not because of its words, but due to the actions, or rather inactions, of those who pledged to uphold it. This breakdown in the treaty ignited the Great Sioux War. It was not just a struggle for land, but a fight for sovereignty, for the right to uphold a promise and safeguard sacred ground. But what happened when this simmering tension burst into open conflict? That's a story filled with courage, tragedy, and defiance, one we will explore in the next segment. Sparks of resistance, the Battle of Little Bighorn and its aftermath. From a spark, a fire can grow. Little Bighorn sparked the Great Sioux War. The fight is a metaphor for resistance and fortitude in the face of overwhelming odds. June 25, 1876. Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer, who started the Black Hills Gold Rush, led his 7th Cavalry and Sioux, Cheyenne, and Arapaho tribes. Custer anticipated an easy victory, but he underestimated the resolve of the Native American forces. Led by iconic figures like Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse, they mounted a fierce defense of their land and their way of life. Custer and his troops were thrashed. This victory gave the Sioux and their supporters faith that they might stop the U.S. administration. It sparked a more deadly war. The U.S. military increased after Little Bighorn. They seized the Black Hills and forced the Sioux on reservations. But even as they faced these losses, the spirit of resistance endured. The Sioux, though now divided and scattered, refused to accept their fate quietly. They staged daring escapes from reservations and fought against incursions into their remaining territories. Every act of defiance was a reminder of the Battle of Little Bighorn, a symbol of their ongoing struggle. But, as with any conflict, the Great Sioux War exacted a heavy toll. Losses mounted. The once mighty bison herds dwindled, and the Sioux people, caught in the crossfire of progress and preservation, paid the price. Echoes of defeat, the Wounded Knee Massacre. Let's turn our gaze now to a sad chapter of our tale, the Wounded Knee Massacre. It's a poignant reminder of the human cost of conflict and the pain that echoes long after the guns fall silent. The year was 1890. I Wounded Knee Creek on a December morning. The U.S. 7th Cavalry guarded hundreds of Sioux, including women and children. It was tense. The U.S. troops were there to disarm the Sioux. But amidst this tense operation, a shot rang out. Nobody knows who fired first, but that solitary shot was a spark that ignited a horrific massacre. The U.S. soldiers opened fire on the unarmed Sioux. Around 300 Sioux men, women, and children lay dead or dying in the snow within minutes. This event marked a brutal end to the Great Sioux War and effectively ended the Sioux's armed resistance. Wounded Knee was a tragedy, not a war. A terrible reminder of the war's cruelty and Sioux's costly pay for the Black Hills. Sioux spirit survived such a tremendous loss. They found new methods to establish their identity and fight for their rights in the ensuing years. Click the like button to show appreciation for this trip. Don't miss out on our next exciting exploration of the past. Subscribe now. History isn't simply numbers. It's our narrative continuously being written. We'll see you next episode.